Welcome, I'm Nick Vitellari with Entrepreneur and Innovation Exchange, and in this installment of the series, we're here at the headquarters of LegalZoom.
That's right.
And I'm with one of the co-founders, Eddie Hartman, who is not only an entrepreneur, but an innovator.
Thank you.
An inventor, and I would say an industry transformer. So welcome, Eddie.
Hi.
And great to have you.
Thank you so much for being here, Nick.
My pleasure. So many of you know LegalZoom. LegalZoom is transforming the legal services industry, and it's one of the more successful entrepreneur organizations in the last several years. And so we thought it would be great to talk to Eddie Hartman about some of his background and also how he got to this point with LegalZoom. So Eddie, we like to, in this kind of program, we like to kind of get back to the early years of our entrepreneurs. And the question we'd like to ask is, were there any telltale signs early in your life that kind of gave you a clue that you might be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think there were.
Really?
Well, first, what would a telltale sign be that somebody is an entrepreneur?
Right.
We know a couple things from research. And I know that most of the people watching this video might be thinking about being entrepreneurs themselves. So with all the respect in the world, the first indication that you might be an entrepreneur is that you're slightly crazy. And let me give you a couple of pieces of evidence to back this up. So I understand a test was done trying to determine how entrepreneurs differ in characteristics than non-entrepreneurs. And one of the questions, most of the questions really didn't signal much. We're not strongly correlative or predictive. But there was one question. They asked people, how long will it take you to get home tonight on your commute?
Interesting.
And then on the next page it asked people, what's the best you ever did in terms of getting home, in terms of your commute? What's the least amount of time it ever took you? For entrepreneurs, the amount of time it's going to take them to get home that night and the best time ever is exactly the same.
Wow.
Yeah, entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic to the point of a little bit of self-delusion. I'm constantly reminded of that famous marshmallow study that was done with children, first at Stanford University, repeated with different things. I understand a chocolate bunny at one time, but the first one was with marshmallows, and they would give the child a marshmallow and then say, hey, I'm going to leave the room. If I come back and you haven't eaten the marshmallow, I'm going to give you more marshmallows, which is a bigger treat. And the question was, could they delay gratification? The interesting thing is that the kids who succeeded, and that was highly predictive of success later on in life, it's not like they stared at the marshmallow and just willed themselves not to eat the marshmallow. If you watch these tapes, the kids hid from the marshmallow, or they sang, or they pretended the marshmallow wasn't there. There was a certain amount of self-delusion required to pretend that they weren't interested in snatching up that marshmallow and eating it, right? That executive functioning allowed them to delude themselves for a period of time that the marshmallow wasn't interesting. And the people who didn't have that ability to delude themselves ate the marshmallow, and according to the studies, which have now been, they're quite famous, had problems later on in life, whether it was, being interned in jail, or failed marriages, or unemployment. That ability to tell yourself a story and keep yourself from doing the thing you ought not to do, incredibly powerful. I would say in entrepreneurs, it's just turned up to 11. We can not only tell ourselves the story that keeps ourselves from doing the wrong thing, we can tell ourselves a story that convinces us that the impossible is absolutely going to happen. We are going to get home tonight in the least amount of time it has ever taken me to get home. And in fact, I bet if you looked at it, the really good entrepreneurs, the Elon Musks of the world, how much time is it going to take me to get home tonight? 1 minute less than the best I've ever done.
Wow.
That's that incredible optimism.
That's really interesting. This sort of animus that's driving the entrepreneur. It's really interesting. Just the incredible persistence that we do see in entrepreneurs, and that's a really interesting take on it. That's really interesting.
I think everybody knows most entrepreneurs fail.
Yeah.
And the ones that eventually succeed are the ones that pick themselves back up. I don't know anyone. I don't know a single person who succeeded at entrepreneurship and doesn't have a failure in their past. Not one person.
That's true. And you know, the legend is that in Silicon Valley, if you don't have a failure
that's right.
in your history, then you're not
People wonder
respected.
what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say my friend Brian Lee, one of his enormous, powers really, is that I don't think he even notices when a company of his doesn't quite work out, because he is just on to the next thing.
Wow.
You can't stop him.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a little bit of a timeline? How did you get from your early years with this sort of? I'm sensing you're telling us that you have that same sort of drive. So how did you get to LegalZoom? I mean, was this a straight line route, or?
As an undergrad, I think I had that incredible enthusiasm and appetite. I wanted to take every course. I wanted to do everything. I think no surprise for a man as clearly, how can I put this? Like an appealing guy like me. I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons with a very, very small and sad group of friends as a kid, and I always wanted to play the character that had more than one profession,
Mm-hmm.
And in college, I always wanted to take every class that I possibly could. I played as many instruments as I could. I just had a big appetite to do a lot of things, and I think that stayed with me my whole life.
Interesting. Wow. So what is sort of you've been through, you're a serial entrepreneur.
That's true.
And you're a serial inventor.
Yeah.
So how did you get here? I mean, how did you get to LegalZoom? How did that all happen?
I think I know the question you're asking, but rather than go through my entire resume, which has got to be boring as crap, I will tell you I was very lucky. It happened to be that I was at the right age just as the internet boom was happening. And at that time there was such opportunity for a person who had some technical skills, and I'd been a computer science geek, but also had a little bit of that entrepreneurial sense and really wanted to get out there and do risky things and enjoyed risk, enjoyed it, eating big kind of life. And so, some friends of mine had started a company called Troon, and I joined them, and I was the CTO. And we created tools and applications, and it was the perfect time. I mean, the story of Levi Strauss. It was during the gold rush, and there were all these gold miners come to Sutter's Mill and the river there, and they were all panning for gold, but not Levi Strauss. He sold them tools.
Right.
And he sold them in specific the riveted pants that they would need in order to be miners. And so what did we do? We were selling all these people who were panning for internet gold the tools that they needed to build their websites and to get out there on the internet. And then, of course, we were acquired by a consultancy, and once again, we were out there telling people this is how you start a business, these are the tools you're going to need in order to get out there. And it was that led me to being in, I think, a very unusual place just at the peak of the internet boom, because I was consulting to some of the biggest companies in America, a lot of Fortune 500s, and a lot of startups at the same time. And you could see how crazy things were. And when I met Brian and Brian socially, they had a friend who was worth, I'm going to say, more than $1 billion on paper.
Wow.
This was not a smart guy. It really wasn't. But the internet at the time rewarded people who had not gone for traditional professions. I mean, the previous generation had been rewarded for what? Finding what they were good at, staying with what they were good at, becoming an investment banker, becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer. Well, my friends were lawyers, and they were not happy, and they were not worth $1 billion. Do you know who's worth $1 billion? People who hadn't been able to get into law school, but really enjoyed getting out there and starting things. So I think looking back on it, Brian and Brian approached me because I'd started things before. I'd started, more than one business. And I was in the business of telling people how to start businesses on the internet. And both of them knew that they were destined for bigger things. And I think together we had this idea of something really amazing that we could do that'd be a perfect fit for the internet. Because for the first time, at least of the companies I knew, you wouldn't be shipping something like dog food or toothpaste. You'd be doing something ideally suited for the internet, which is information. Because what is a will or a trademark? What is a contract? Essentially, it's information. But it's information that people don't know how to come by.
So A lot of times when we talk to entrepreneurs, there was some sort of mentor, or maybe even some type of individual that inspired them in some way, that gave them that extra impetus to sort of drive forward.
Yeah.
Did you have an?
I did.
You did?
Yeah. My mentor is a man named Howard Ruby, who I'm very fortunate he's still alive. Howard was divorced in the late 60s. And he had the following brainstorm. He realized that when two people get divorced, one of them needs a new place to live. Sometimes both of them, but certainly one of them does.
Right.
And so he created the first extended stay living space, first extended stay residence.
Wow.
And today, you've got Marriott extended stay, you've got Garden, and so forth. But he created Oakwood out of nothing. And from nothing, he created a multi-thousand property concern that he owned. It was his, it was private. And frankly, a lot of what we've seen at LegalZoom came from his mentorship. He would always say, stay private as long as you can. Run it like a business, not like the internet fly-by-nights. And my partners had the same mentality, but Howard would always say, it's a business, run it like a business. It's your business, keep it private. I actually told him I would be his servant. I'd do anything he wanted if he would be my mentor and tell me how to run a business and teach me the things that he knew how to do so well. And to this day, I consult with him and I talk to him. I'll never forget the first time that we actually got some investment. I'd given him shares when we started the company as my mentor. And you have to understand, Howard's a man of means. Crazy, I mean,
I can imagine.
Kind of means that come with thousands of properties. So I went to him in his home, and I said, Howard, we never did give you your stock certificates, but I want to let you know now they're worth something. And they were worth something with it was a six-figure sum. But Howard, the way that he took it, and I'll never forget, he took these stock certificates, and he said, would you look at that? Eddie, this is so impressive. Look at these stock certificates. Thank you so much. This is such a nice thing. And it was almost as if he was saying, look at this thing you did in school. Mrs. Ruby and I are going to put this on the refrigerator. We are so proud of you. Look at this.
Wow.
This is really amazing. Wow. Look at how professionally you did these stock certificates. Wow, the edges are all, scalloped and wow. You should be quite proud.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a great story. What an amazing legacy in a sense, right? That's just incredible.
Well, Howard has had to go through. He inspired me to go to Wharton to get my MBA. He's had to go through some wrenching pivots in his business. At one point, they tried to take control from him. He took it right back.
Wow.
And he's had health issues. It fought right through.
Wow.
He's an amazing human being.
Yeah.
I'm very, very lucky.
Wow,
just
that
to
is
know
very
him.
fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say the biggest lesson is that you've learned as an entrepreneur? In terms of other people, obviously, are interested in, what the big lessons are.
Let me give you three.
Okay, sure.
In ascending order of importance.
Okay.
First lesson is your company will always have stages. And the people that are important to the business at each stage are critical. You need them to bleed into the company. The company will nourish itself on their blood, really. Their sweat, their tears, their lost weekends and holidays and time that they don't get with their children. And then here's the real sort of hardest part of the first lesson. And eventually the company will outgrow them, many of them. Whoever is your chief technical officer for your first 3 years has a very different skill set than the chief technical officer you'll need. And either you find another job for that person, or that person needs to have the right personality to be able to slot underneath. And even there, it may not work out.
Right.
The sort of hands-on firefighter that works on the early days on the product team or on the sales team or even in the finance team may not respond well to the more methodical manager. And even the more methodical manager, eventually, you'll need a real world-class CFO, CTO, CIO, whatever, COO, and they will have yet a different viewpoint, yet a different worldview. And the person you brought in as your mid-tier, they will need to figure out what is their path forward. And I think you need to be very mindful of that. I don't know if that means you need to somewhat disassociate yourself and not become too close to the people you work with. I've seen people take that tack.
Right, that's always a difficult issue.
Right, and I don't know if that's the right way to do it. It's not the way I've done it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it may be smart for some people, but I think you really do have to understand that having a relationship with the other people who work with you, where you all pull together and build the company, but understand that at times people may need to leave, and it may not be their choice.
Yeah.
You should always be on the lookout for them, ways that you can ease that for them. It's a very hard lesson, but a very important one.
Yeah.
The second thing is the most important thing that you have as an entrepreneur is not your idea. I used to give a list of Brian Lee's ideas that had turned into companies. And no one has ever to date picked out the two that turned into big companies. No one ever picks the Shoe of the Month Club.
Interesting.
So people often think it's the idea.
Right.
Or your smarts.
Yep.
Or your prior experience. If you ask me, it's your stamina. It's purely your... I actually told my children, I keep little diaries for them, and I wrote to them, I said, the one thing your dad is good at in this world, my one talent, is not stopping. It's the only thing I'm good at is failing to stop. If you have that, you got a shot as an entrepreneur. And that leads to my third lesson. The third lesson is the most important one of all. And the third lesson is this. You can't go in halfway. So a thing that I think really works is this. Because we did this when we started the company, but it was inadvertent. If you want to start a business, you begin by saying these are the people who are going to be with me right now, and they're going to bleed into the company, and my most important virtue is stamina. But the third and final and most important is that sense of commitment, and here's what I recommend you doing. If your mom is still alive, call her up. Ask to borrow more money than she can really give you. So maybe she has to borrow some, and then spend it all into the business. Wow, that's pretty sadistic advice.
Yeah.
If you do that, though, here's what's going to happen. There's going to come some moment, some dark night. You're going to have to make a decision. And if you make the wrong decision, you're going to have to call up your mom and say, that money you lent me, you're never getting back. And you will do anything not to make that phone call. You will do things you never thought you could do so that you never have to pick up the phone and make that call. And that is the level of commitment, plus the stamina, plus the understanding of the people that you work with, the team that you work with, that you need to actually be able to create a successful company. But you do that, you are so far ahead of other people.
Wow.
If you have that body and soul commitment.
Yeah, that's really exciting because so people, you can't get away from it, and they're essential to a successful startup.
That's right.
And it's tough. I mean, working with folks and
Always
and
tough.
is very difficult,
Yeah,
but you
always
got to
tough.
be willing to do that.
Yep.
This notion of stamina, it reminds me of what you were saying about the study.
Yeah.
You know, it takes that kind of brute force stamina.
Delude yourself and
yeah.
just sweat through it.
Yeah, and go for it. And then this notion of doing what you need to do to get through it.
Yeah.
And having that. But it's not just an intellectual element. It's really, like you said, body and soul, heart, felt.
Yeah, you got to get to that
compulsion almost, right?
You got to get to that desperate animal part of you, where you will not die. You'll do anything, anything to get through that. I think that it's funny. I'd never put it together, but I think you've just done it for me. You find the right teammates. You convince yourself that you can do the impossible, and then you sweat until you can do the impossible. And the thing that keeps you in there is the fact that you've completely committed and you have no other way out. You know, it's this or death. And then you find a way to do it.
That's very powerful.
You put those things together, and that's how you.
Wow, that's exciting.
That's how you build a successful company, kids.
That's all you have to do,
It's as easy as
right?
that. Yeah.
No, but that's great, and I think that's part of the excitement of it and the attractiveness of it, right? And then because you're essentially, in many ways, a startup is building something from nothing.
Yeah.
That entrepreneuring, a tendency is and desire is to really craft and build something.
I have a wonderful friend in Texas whose name is Roy Spence. Roy Spence and I are going to build something where we encourage more entrepreneurs. He's a fantastic guy, by the way. And I said, we ought to build, in this website we've been talking about, we ought to encourage people to post their dreams, things they're really excited about. He said, that's a great idea. And we ought to get them to post in their stories and their challenges. That's a great idea. And then I said, we ought to post their parents' reactions when they told them they were going to be an entrepreneur. And he said, no, don't do that. And other people have said that too.
Yeah.
Because your parents are going to tell you, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
If you ask entrepreneurs, generally speaking, their parents were not positive because it's a crazy thing. You don't want to send your child off to do something where they're likely to fail.
True.
And the problem is if you listen to too much of that, you're going to start to believe that you're going to fail. It's so important to tell yourself that you're not, to sweat through it, and to commit 100%. That's how you actually succeed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. There's one final question we usually ask.
Sure.
Because it kind of maybe sums it up a little bit, and that is, do you have any favorite motto or sort of phrase that sort of encapsulates any of this? Most, that comes out of your experience.
I really should have something on the tip of my tongue, huh? If I did, and Nick, I wish I did, I think the closest I have to it is that if you really want to do this, build your talent at not stopping, because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
Even after you fail, don't stop.
That's great. Yeah, just don't stop.
Just don't stop.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much for
What a
taking
pleasure.
the time with us. This has been
Yeah.
great,
Yeah,
and really
fantastic.
enjoyed it. A pleasure to meet you. Thank you for taking the time with us today
Yeah.
to share your thoughts. And
So glad to do it.
yeah, love the passion, and I think you've really given folks who will watch this a real sense of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur.
Well, Nick, thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.